Dana White's Contender Series Week 3 is in the books, Dominic. And once again, we are back here for the 4 fights that we got. We did lose a fight, unfortunately, this week. There was some weight problems in our flyweight fight, so it unfortunately got scrapped. Per usual, we're going to go fight by fight, give our thoughts. And then at the end, we're going to do just like you saw DC tonight, we're going to give the power rankings.
Of course.
I mean, through 2 weeks, Dominic, I don't know what our contract status, as far as who we're giving contracts out to, like what the ratio is, but been pretty good. Not Dana White heavy. We've definitely withheld some opportunities, but we'll see if that changes today. Because Dominic, for the first time this season, Dana White did not award all winners a contract. Only 3 of 4 get that luxurious UFC opportunity. We'll start at the bottom here. Luis Pajuelo gets the first round 3-minute 43-second TKO over Robbie Ring. Talk about that knee to the body while he was on top. What did you think about that, man? What a ferocious finish.
I swear, dude, body knockouts might be the most gruesome to watch outside of maybe some limbs breaking and some bones breaking because, man, you see the kicks to the body or the leg kick finishes, but when you're on the ground like that, it just seemed a little bit more ruthless than normal. Had him in side control, he revved that knee back and drilled it into Robbie Ring's side, and you knew it was over from there. And Luis goes in and finishes with the strikes, 8-1, 7 knockouts to his name. That was a pretty good way to start a card, an emphatic finish. He looked good for the short amount of time we got to see him. It was pretty damn convincing.
Yeah, it's always tough to sort of project these guys as prospects when you only see them for the one fight. We're not as big of fans as we are, Dominic. We have other interests. It's hard to watch a lot of the regional MMA out there, even though a lot of it's great. We love watching an occasional LFA, Cage Warriors, all that, but can't follow it in the same capacity. So these are really our initial exposure to a lot of these guys. And because of that, it can, there can be on both sides of the coin, you can have guys that look not as impressive who are actually really good prospects that could have bright futures, and you get the inverse. But here, I will just say that Pajuelo, I was really on board with. Like, I just thought the guy showed a lot in a short amount of time. Really, the big takeaway is the ferocity of the finish, like the creativity of it. Like, to throw that knee to the body while he's on top, like not just staying stagnant, not just trying to control positioning, really looking for that finish. Those are check boxes, like check offs for getting that contract from Dana White. And 145 pounds, right? This was a featherweight fight. So
yes.
Another nice asset to the featherweight division, a tough division to make an impact in. So obviously we will see. I would love to see, I think even DC said this, I'd love to see him get a quick turnaround. Didn't take much damage here. So turn him around quick. Let's see if he's for real. But I'll just go ahead and spoil it. He was my number 1.
Same.
Yeah, so definitely the guy that blew me away the most, and we'll see if that holds true in the next couple of years. Our women's fight. So we got Josefine Knutsson gets the unanimous decision win over.
I think it was Assis. She said it.
Verbeek. I think it was Verbeek. Josephine was apparently on road to UFC, which I know, Dominic, you might have watched a little bit more than I did, but she did not. Obviously, something fell short there at some point, I guess, because that was the whole point when Laura Sanko was talking to her about how she was not happy with her performance on that show. Here, she seemed much happier. It seemed like there was a lot of optimism about the performance and kind of the initial post-fight interview and whatnot, and with herself. But yet she doesn't get the contract, Dominic. Dana said he just didn't see it with her. She hurt Verbeek a couple times in this fight, but it does get it all the way to the decision. Pretty clear decision for Knutsson. I'm curious your thoughts. Did you feel like she, kind of like what Dana White said, just didn't have it tonight? Or is there maybe injustice being done to Josefine Knutsson here?
I'd say this was the right decision. I mean, she was clean throughout and maintained control, like within the clinch, better in the striking exchanges and whatnot. But she landed that left high kick very early on, and it looked like her opponent was basically almost out on her feet, had her wobbling, and didn't quite go in for the finish. She's good, well rounded it seemed, but maybe just not ready yet. 6 fights, 6-0, 5 decisions. But yeah, I think I would agree there. This could be someone we see maybe come back or get a couple more fights in on the regional scene, and she's all of a sudden signed by the UFC. Like, this is one where I wouldn't be surprised if in a year or so we're seeing her on a prelim card and saying, "Oh, that name looks familiar." Contender Series last year.
I'm surprised that Dana did not offer her like a second fight this season or something. Not that you want to have necessarily that quick of a turnaround, but I thought she showed enough to where, it seemed like he was really hung up on the lack of like a killer instinct, I think is the way I'll kind of summarize it. Having her hurt multiple times, but seemingly kind of resting on her laurels, coasting to a decision victory rather than taking some risk and maybe getting that finish. So you feel like the talent might be there, but Dana just didn't really care for the actual performance itself.
Yeah.
And I feel like you kind of give her, you've already given her a second shot here after apparently being on road to UFC. So you see that there's interest from the matchmakers to have her in. I would prefer to see her, come back this season, or maybe she can get a short notice opportunity or something. I do think it plays a factor. What really surprises is that it's, this is a women's fight, strawweight fight. Strawweight's a division that's always been hailed as kind of the best of the best for women's MMA. And in a lot of ways, it still is. You just saw Zhang Wei Li Saturday put on a dominant showing. But in terms of prospects, I feel like, women's flyweight is really taking a lot of that shine.
For sure.
And I was a little surprised for that reason to not see her get the contract, considering I felt like she was pretty well polished. I thought she, really controlled and won the entirety of this fight for the most part. But really, it's just that one thing that kind of hung her up from getting that contract. So you said you tend to kind of agree with Dana's point of view. Like, do you feel like the lack of a really going for that finish is what kind of held you and Dana back from wanting to give her that contract?
Yeah, I would say, because I feel like the longer the fight went on, I felt like I could clearly see she was just the all-around better fighter in every aspect. So even if she didn't get a finish here, just some sort of a little bit more, just something. There was something missing, I guess, for me, and obviously for Dana here. So yeah, that's what it came down to.
Now, the guy who's going to be taking a lot of the headlines from this card, if there's anybody else doing what we're doing here, where we recap week over week, Oban Elliott gets the majority decision win over Kaik, Brito. Ultimately, Elliott has a big come from behind win here, nearly out on his feet in round 2. Comes back literally in round 2, turns it into a dogfight, and then comes out the fresher guy in round 3. Seems to have
great third round.
Kind of rises from the grave, so to speak, and has a good third round, gets the win ultimately. One of the 3 judges, I am assuming, scored that round 2 a 10-8 for Brito, which the commentary team were definitely hitting as a potential point throughout that fight. Obviously, the personality seems to be there. He's got a great story, wanting to. It was like a note of appreciation for his mom, and ultimately is like he wanted to do it in memory of his dad. Something like that. So it has the story. Showed a lot of heart, which no surprise there based off of what I just said. Dominic, all on board with this guy? You said, you put the tweet out there. You said, give this man a contract. So you bought in here.
Yeah, it was one of those where the storyline really was hook, line, and sinker. And then you add in what he was able to do in that fight. It might not have been the cleanest at times, but to overcome adversity, we talk about a lot with prospects on our show here. And in that third round, to not only regain in between, but then to be very composed and intelligent and dominate on the ground with like his ground and pound, and the elbows were slicing up Brito. So he really turned what was at first just kind of a, in round 1, he was it was a decent feeling out round, could have went either way. Round 2, he gets basically out on his feet, like you said. Round 3, bounces back and looks incredible. It was a weird one, but you put all those factors together with that storyline. This was something I felt like you got to give this guy a chance. Maybe out of the 4, I don't know where we rank him in terms of potential, right? He may be on the lower spectrum of the 4, but when you're in that excitement, you have a personality to back it up as well. I just feel like he checked a lot of boxes that a show like Contender Series and a man like Dana is looking for, and he checked the boxes for me too.
This is constantly a spectrum that I kind of try to be mindful of, but I struggle to sort of tote the line. And that's on, if I'm awarding the contracts, if I'm evaluating these guys as prospects, am I giving more weight in terms of handing out contracts for the potential, or is it for the performance?
Right.
Is it the fight? If the fight delivers, if it was obviously the best fight of the night. I mean, that round 2 was insane. It was just a great fight, very competitive, back and forth. But is that what should take, precedent to get that contract, or is it the upside? Is it the potential? Dana a lot of times will award contracts based off the division that they're in, if they're heavyweights or flyweights or women's fighters, that need more prospects. You'll see that. And I'm not even sure if necessarily Dana really has that figured out. And I don't know if I have a clear idea. I feel like sometimes maybe I lean one way or another. I just talked about this with Luis Pajuelo. Great performance. It was quick, hard to really know what you're really getting there. There's very few guys who come through this show that are no doubt can't miss prospects. I mean, the most recent example, probably Bo Nickel, which I think in most cases that guy's not going through the Contender Series with how far along he is.
Yeah.
But then even Sean O'Malley back in the day, I think the majority of people looked at that guy and said that's a guy who has a lot of potential.
3-piece dinner with biscuits. O'Malley!
Yeah.
Maybe some others feel that way about Jack Della Maddalena, or some of these other guys that have came through, or girls that have came through the show, Jamal Hill, all these people. That's just a line that I don't really have figured out yet of as I'm evaluating and doing the power rankings each week, am I putting an emphasis on the upside or the performance? Is it a mixture of the two? Do you kind of have that figured out, Dom? Do you kind of know where you tend to evaluate based off of based off of what you're saying about Oban Elliott? It seems like the performance itself tends to take more weight than the actual upside, because it's an entertainment show, right? That's kind of a whole thing. And if they're not putting on they could be the best prospect in the world, but if it's not a very good fight, it's if this is supposed to be what did I always say, the most dangerous job interview, whatever, you could be the best candidate for a job in the world, but if you don't deliver in the interview, you're probably not going to get the job. So how do you kind of tote that line?
Well, it's good to know that none of us have this figured out, and we're in this together in terms of the contracts and the power rankings, because I think I'm right there with you. I feel like it's great, obviously ideal. You have a great performance and you see the upside and potential, and boom, it's easy. But then sometimes with Oban, maybe it's just the performance tonight was so crazy, and at spur of the moment, you got to go with it. And for a guy that we're about to talk about in Zachary Reese, where, he still had the quick finish and stuff, but he's so young, a lot of upside, a lot of finishes. I view his potential very fun. So the fighters are all so different. The fights are all so different. I do not have it down to a science. There's definitely times where the rankings are potential up higher and performance lower, and vice versa the next week. There's no perfect way to do it.
Sure. The main event of the evening, that last fight was welterweight. This was middleweight, correct? Zachary Reese, you just mentioned him, gets the first round 1 minute 14-second armbar submission over Eli Aronov. And Dominic, this is going to be something that's going to really play a part into my power rankings this week. It was a good call. It was fun fights. Don't get me wrong. I was definitely feeling this card felt a little more regional MMA to me than what I typically get from Contender Series. Meaning, this isn't slights on the actual people who were winning, or necessarily there was some good performances here. saw a few low IQ moments that were like kind of like the
Mm.
Leonardo DiCaprio meme where I'm immediately pointing at the screen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and if I'm noticing that as someone who doesn't train,
Mm-hmm.
who, yes, I'm a huge fan and, I feel like I know a thing or two, but do I know more than the people actually competing? No. So I point to Eli here, and DC was kind of letting him have it for this as well.
Yeah.
Being really close to getting out of that armbar and just resting right back into it. And then he goes for a punch to the face and leaves himself completely vulnerable to the submission here, the armbar. So, Zachary Reese took a couple really clean shots there in that minute 14 seconds. And yes, he gets the finish. It's in a minute 14 seconds. It was a slick armbar, but if anything, it just gave me more questions than answers. Like,
You can't help but wonder.
This is a guy that's hard to evaluate. Like, it's hard to not give him a contract because of the quickness of the finish. But I will admit, I do not walk away super impressed.
Yeah, that's fair. 100%. This was the one, right? When we're just having this conversation between potential and performance here, where I felt like Zach was on the middle of that spectrum for me. Again, in a minute, you only get to evaluate so much, but like he got hit a couple times on the feet, but then you can see what he can do with this armbar. But then it's like, oh, well, maybe Eli should have defended it better and the armbar would have never presented itself. So it just kind of depends on how you want to view it. For me, I like what could come of Zachary Reese when I see a middleweight that's 6'4", 77-inch reach, 6-0, 6 first-round finishes, multiple knockouts, multiple submissions. That part, 29 years old, right in his prime, I'm holding on to now. Let's see if there is some potential here in the future, and that's kind of where I ended the night with him.
There was a nice little tidbit at the end of the fight from Dan Kelly, right? That was minute 14 seconds. That was his fourth shortest fight in his UFC career, or not in his MMA career. So a man who is accustomed to quick finishes is Zachary Reese, and that's a good way to paint the picture there, Dom. There is definitely potential in terms of the actual physicality, the physical traits. So yes, Eli hit like a truck and it showed.
Yeah.
But when it came time to maybe show a little more IQ, show a little more, I don't know what it is, a little experience,
Sure.
he wasn't able to. He's maybe a little green. So he's a guy who could maybe come back too. So, very young.
I think he was undefeated too, or had a really good
record.
Yep.
So, yep. They were both undefeated here. Shout out to our guy, Johnny the Greek. Almost had a perfect night, Dominic. So,
yeah.
I hope he kept receipts from the last couple of years because he could really burn MMA Twitter down here in a few weeks if he keeps it up. But with that, we will go into our power rankings for Contender Series Week 3. So we're both in agreement. Luis Pajuelo, number 1, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We'll just go. We'll each kind of just give our. So like, who do you have at number 2?
I put Zachary Reese number 2.
I'm struggling this week.
I think
talking about these fights have changed my mind on like the way I thought I was gonna feel coming on here, and then the way I'm feeling now, I think is like a pretty drastic difference. I will agree with you, Zachary Reese number 2. What about number 3?
I had Oban. At 3.
I'm gonna have Josefine Knutsson at number 3.
I 100% see that. Yeah.
And then number 4, Oban Elliott, you have Josefine Knutsson.
Yep.
How many contracts are you giving out, Dominic? Sounds like you're giving out at least 3.
It would have been 3. Yep. It would have been the same 3 as Dana this week.
I'm going to be honest. I think I've only given 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So here's what I would, in my head, this is, when I was coming on here, I was expecting to say 3. I was expecting to give Josefine. I was expecting everybody but Oban Elliott, which I think a lot of people would look at and be shocked by. I was actually surprised you came on here and you were not as heavy on Oban as I thought you were going to be based off the tweet you posted. Like you were demanding that man get a contract. But on here, you were a little more. I mean, I get it. I get the reasoning, but I did see the poll 100% for him as far as if he should get a contract. I think he got the most votes out of all of our polls. So obviously the man made an impact. B, Oban Elliott.
Yeah, yeah.
I think a guy like Zachary Reese and someone like really all three of these people, but Zachary Reese and Josefine specifically, they are the people that like Zachary Reese, especially with the amount of the short time. Give him a second fight in the
Yeah,
season.
I can see that. Yeah.
That's that was my rationale. Now this is me, you know me, Dominic. I'm going to be a little more strict. You know, I actually appreciate a lot of people look at DC as being kind of the fun-loving guy who, you know, doesn't take the actual role of a commentator and everything that goes with it all that serious. And some people don't like him for that reason. I actually appreciate what he was bringing tonight to the show because even though I think people like Dan Kelly, Laura Senko, Paul Felder, they're great, but they're all so positive, like all the time. And I liked hearing a guy like DC be honest about his assessment. And I'm not saying that the others are not. I'm just saying I appreciated seeing a different perspective as a guy who's been a 2-division champion, where he's like, no, I'm not that impressed by what I saw from a couple of these. And I will admit, like, I feel like a lot of my thoughts sort of were in line with his, but that was purely, I guess, coincidental. I tend to agree. Like, there was some low IQ moments on this card. It felt very regional compared to a lot of what I see on Contender Series. And guys like Zachary Reese, Oban Elliott, even Josefine Knutsson, they may end up being great prospects, but I would rather give them another chance to show that rather than just throwing them into what's going to be a very uphill battle as of now, from my perspective, what I can see. So, anything you want to add to that for your kind of power rankings there? You were a little surprised by my one contract being given out. So,
no, I really see it because you're right. Like the Zachary Reese one, I feel like especially is someone that type of performance so quick, the mistake from his opponent. Maybe it's easier to just say, all right, bring him back in week 10. We'll get him in there again. Kind of like Bo Nickel. He was just in and out so fast. I know they're not the same hype wise, but you get the point. And Josefine, it's interesting for her because of the road to the UFC she's been on. Now she's been on Contender. What will they do? I'm not going to be surprised one bit if she works her way there in the future. I really wouldn't be, especially at strawweight. And Oban, again, was like the most unclean, like not the best shiny performance as the others. But then the way that he brought it back in that third round was what held on with me and was so impressive. But I can see a one contract night.
Yeah,
it is not like out of the realm.
The other low IQ moment, I don't even think I said it, was, and this was a big reason why Oban got put number 4, because yes, he had that. He looked great in round 3. Like that round 3, that was very clean. I'm not sure. I hate when I talk like this because I know my spot, my place in the sport when I'm talking about it. Like, but Dominic, that armbar was there for like the whole last minute of round 2.
I was yelling it with my dad. Yeah.
I hate to be that guy. I mean, I get it. Like Brito could kill me in a second. I know. Like, and I know the commentary team were touching on that too. But I'm sitting there like, what is this guy doing?
All he had to do was lift the right leg over. It was there.
I know both guys were very hurt because Brito got rocked right back after he kind of went in wild, got hit with a couple clean shots. So maybe there was some cobwebs he was still trying to get out. But Dominic, if he puts that armbar on like 20 seconds earlier,
it's over.
Fight's a wrap. It's over. Yeah. And now shout out to Oban for being able to come back still after being rocked, and he looked like he got a second win in round 3, looked fresh. Really showing that resolve. But it's hard to, when you look at his opponent and see something like that, you kind of go like, ooh, like that just looked very
more
regional.
Experienced fighter likely gets that armbar right now.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest.
My God. Like 99 times out of 100, I hope. I've never seen something like that where I'm just sitting there like, I mean, you see some frustrating things in this sport sometimes, even in our position. But that was something where it's like, I mean, unforgivable.
It was on a platter.
It cost him the entire fight. Like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. But make sure to join us this time next week. We will be going over week 4. We chug along. Dominic, the season's already almost halfway over.
Oh my gosh, it's about to be September and everything. Jiminy, where does time go?
Get out the what's that? Not Fire and Ice. What's that band called? They sing September.
Do you remember? I don't know the band name. Someone will let us know. I hope.
The
Someone.
4 Seasons. I don't know what their name is, but
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
yeah, there you go. Earth, Wind, and Fire. Boy, we were showing our
4
age there.
seasons.
That's the
Wait,
first time I felt really young on this show in a long time. Yeah, let's just ignore what I said there. Earth, Wind, and Fire is
the elements
move.
is what he was looking for. I think.
Looking for the period. I was just reading off the periodic table. But yeah, make sure to join us here. If you like this content, make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel.